We've talked a lot about some things the leader can do. Can we talk now about some things that a leader should not do? Anyone?
Sure. I think the big things that come to mind are don't hide. Be out there, get out there, and don't try and push it off to your number two or someone else. Get out there and be present. I think that the terms are kicked around almost interchangeably, but they're really not, is instead of taking responsibility, take accountability. You're not responsible necessarily for the incident or for what happened, but you're accountable for everything that happens in your organization. So I think by a leader getting out front, being visible, and saying, you know what, ultimately I'm accountable for what happened, that takes the wind out of anybody's sails who's looking to throw rocks, because they're so used to people trying to pass the blame off to someone else. That makes a story if somebody's shirking their responsibility. The story is gone if somebody stands up and says, I'm accountable, and I'll do the best I can. I promise that I will conduct a full investigation and come out with objective, clear, and fair findings at the end of that investigation. It's going to take a while. There's a process. We're going to follow that process. And if you can say, as we can in an officer-involved shooting or something similar to that, we're working very closely, but there are 3 independent investigations going, our investigation, the coroner's investigation, and the district attorney's investigation. And now all of a sudden, you've made it so you're not in a position to be able to hide anything. It's all going to be out there, and you're going to be straight with people as much as you can. I think that's a big deal.
Great, thank you. Colleen?
Yeah, I would say, too, don't jump to conclusions. And I know that sounds, sort of obvious, but it's so easy to do. I mean, I think that's just human nature. We are in professions where we are trained and ready to respond to emergencies. We don't run from a fire, as they say. We run to the fire. And so it's easy to jump to conclusions because you want to be able to take immediate action. It's a natural instinct many of us have that we develop over the years of service that we have in the rank and file. But that is not necessary for the leader to do because you have time. You need to take the time to have the facts so that you can make good decisions. So the leader should not jump to conclusions. The other thing that was said earlier is to definitely not forget the workforce that is still out there and the day-to-day operations that have to go on in an orderly fashion. When I had a caseload myself, I would go to the different police departments to get police reports and different things and talk with the officers about the people in my caseload years ago. And I can recall one time where one particular agency had a homicide in their city, and that was kind of a rare event for that city. And so when I went up to the front desk to talk to the records person, I said, may I, could you please pull a record on this or that case? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. Well, okay, why? Well, didn't you read we had a homicide last night? Okay, yes, and can you help me out here? Well, I'm sorry, we're all busy and we won't be able to deal with anything outside of that for the next 3 hours. Okay, well, okay. So my only question was at that point, I hope you don't have a traffic accident also at the same time. People still have to get the job done. Leadership needs to be confident in themselves so that they can have the calm approach and the troops will continue to work and get the job done.
If I could just add to that a little bit, in the policing environment, where that I think is particularly acute, is if you have an officer who's hurt and potentially dies, and you don't want to say anything until you notify the family first. But to be able to feed whatever information you can out to officers in the field, what it does is it keeps them in the field rather than at the hospital, which is what they're going to do. That hospital becomes the magnet unless there's information, because they all have some kind of relationship. And so if you can figure out a way to be able to do it so you're not jeopardizing any kind of a notification, I think that's a critical piece as well.
Doctor, what should we not do?
A couple of things. If you have a tendency to micromanage, and you probably know if you do, this isn't a good time.
Nobody in this room would ever do that.
And as a leader, you're ultimately responsible for, so that's in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind, that you do not want things to get worse. You want to stop the bleeding. And you obviously have confidence in yourself, but you've got to have some confidence in your team that they are going to be able to do their jobs. And if you've practiced with them, if you've done exercises, you'll know what their capabilities are. That said, if you have a protracted incident that you're dealing with, it's really important that you get rest where you can. And I know, all of us have been in situations where we're up for 24, 48, even longer hours dealing with something. If it looks like you're going to have a protracted event to deal with, I suggest you immediately start thinking about scheduling so that you can send some people home and that you can figure out, okay, when it's time for me to get some rest, then I know who's going to be here at midnight, so I can go home and turn around and be back at 6 a.m. Some people do great. They thrive on no sleep, and they do excellent jobs and make great decisions. But I can sort of tell you, maybe I'm the oldest person in the room or I'm really close to it, as you get a little bit older, it might get a little bit harder to make sharp decisions if you don't have proper rest.
Thank you.
Just one thing I think is remember that everybody's looking at you to see what your response to whatever the issue is. If you panic, they panic. If you raise your voice, they raise their voice. If you're frustrated, they're frustrated. So to be cognizant of the fact that whatever you're doing, part of it is your demonstration is to be able to get the behavior consistent with what you want it to be. You have to model that behavior.